The heat of the desert is relentless. Beneath the blazing sun, the endless dunes stretch into infinity, broken only by the dust clouds kicked up by the movements of war. This is the Western Desert, a vast, unforgiving expanse where the fate of North Africa, and perhaps the entire war, hangs in the balance. For months, the Axis forces, led by General Erwin Rommel, have been on the offensive, pushing the Allies further eastward. His reputation as the Desert Fox precedes him, a strategist whose daring tactics and swift movements have left the British reeling. In 1942, after a series of crushing defeats, the British are on the ropes. Their forces are exhausted, their supply lines stretched thin, and the once imposing British Eighth Army is a shadow of its former self. Rommel's Africa Corps, on the other hand, is at the height of its strength, pushing deeper into Egypt. The key objective? The Suez Canal, the lifeline between Europe and the Middle East, and the vital access point to oil-rich regions. The stakes are higher than ever. A defeat here would not only mean the loss of the Suez, but could shift the balance of the entire war in favor of the Axis powers. Rommel's swift victories have placed him in a commanding position. The Allies are desperate for a change, but who could stop Rommel's relentless march? Enter General Bernard Montgomery, a relatively unknown figure to many in the British Army. After months of missteps and failed leadership, the British command has placed its faith in Montgomery. His arrival is nothing short of a last-ditch effort to halt Rommel's advance. The question on everyone's mind is simple. Can one man change the course of history? In the unforgiving desert, two men rise as titans of the battlefield, each with their own distinct brand of leadership, each with a different way of waging war. General Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox, has carved his name into the history books with daring victories. His reputation built on boldness, speed, and the ability to outmaneuver his enemies. For Rommel, war is about seizing the initiative, taking risks, and making swift, unpredictable moves. His forces are a reflection of his leadership, fast, flexible, and fiercely loyal, following their commander's every daring move without question. Rommel thrives on the element of surprise, and he leads by example, often at the front lines, sharing in the hardships of his men. Rommel's confidence in his ability to improvise is his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. He places his faith in rapid decision-making, often foregoing careful planning for the sake of speed. In the chaos of battle, this works, until it doesn't. Rommel's reliance on boldness often leads him to gamble with resources and manpower, taking chances that sometimes pay off, but just as often they don't. On the other side stands Bernard Montgomery, a man whose very name invokes discipline, meticulous planning, and a steadfast belief in preparation. Unlike Rommel's flashes of brilliance, Montgomery's brilliance lies in his patience and his ability to command with control and precision. Montgomery is not a man of surprises. He is a man of certainty. Every move is calculated, every contingency planned for. He doesn't gamble. He ensures his success with overwhelming force at the right moment. His troops may not be as fast as Rommel's, but they are unwavering, grounded in the confidence that their leader has prepared them for whatever lies ahead. Montgomery's leadership style stands in stark contrast to Rommel's freewheeling approach. Where Rommel relies on instinct and speed, Montgomery trusts only what can be controlled. His soldiers follow orders with a belief in the thoroughness of their planning and the certainty that their leader has ensured the odds are stacked in their favor. Montgomery's reputation isn't built on charisma or on daring gestures. It is built on a reputation for preparation and unshakable resolve. Yet, for all his planning, Montgomery's approach is not without its own risks. His insistence on perfection can sometimes paralyze action. The question now becomes, can Montgomery's methodical approach overcome the boldness and risk-taking that Rommel brings to the battlefield? in a place as unpredictable and volatile as the desert, will caution outsmart speed, or will it lead to costly hesitation? As the stakes rise, the desert will become the ultimate proving ground for these two vastly different leaders. In the clash between a commander who dares to take risks and one who takes control through calculated certainty, only one will emerge victorious. But at this moment, neither man knows the full extent of the challenge ahead. The desert is quiet, but the tension is palpable. While Rommel's forces push ever closer, Montgomery knows that time is the one thing he cannot afford to waste. His preparations for the Battle of El Alamein are underway, and every detail must be accounted for. This isn't a battle of rushed decisions or half-formed plans. For Montgomery, victory will be decided long before the first shot is fired. One of the first hurdles Montgomery faces is the sheer scale of the operation. The British Eighth Army, though severely weakened by previous defeats, is being reinforced. Troops from across the globe, men from Australia, New Zealand, India, and South Africa, are arriving to bolster the Allied forces. The logistical challenge is immense. Supplies need to be transported across harsh terrain, and every resource must be accounted for. The British Army's reliance on these reinforcements, coupled with the desert's unforgiving environment, means that even the smallest misstep could prove disastrous. But Montgomery isn't just thinking about manpower. He's thinking about how to mislead Rommel and create confusion in the enemy's ranks. His first major move is the development of an intricate deception strategy. Montgomery knows that Rommel, with his overconfidence and instinctive approach, can be misled. He arranges for fake tank formations to be moved around the desert, creating the illusion that the main attack will come from the south. Radio transmissions are broadcast to mislead the Axis forces into thinking that the British are preparing for an attack they're not. It's a classic Montgomery maneuver, sowing confusion, misdirecting the enemy, and taking advantage of Rommel's expectations. Yet it's not just about deception. Montgomery is also concerned with the psychological readiness of his troops. The men under his command, having seen their fair share of defeat, must be made to believe in the success of their mission. Montgomery works tirelessly to instill confidence in his soldiers, making them feel that this time victory is possible. He gives them a clear vision, a path forward. The soldiers aren't just fighting for survival, they're fighting for something greater, something more certain. This is not a gamble, this is a carefully orchestrated plan designed to win. The months leading up to El Alamein are filled with seemingly small details that, in the grand scheme, will prove essential. The Allies are gathering resources, making final preparations, and rehearsing their tactics. The focus is on precision, timing, and overwhelming force at the right moment. Montgomery's insistence on thorough preparation, on making sure every variable is controlled, is what separates his strategy from Rommel's instinctual rapid-fire tactics. And then, as the final days before the battle draw near, Montgomery receives the final piece of the puzzle. Rommel has made his own move. The German forces, assuming an attack will come from the south, have spread their forces thin, leaving the northern front underdefended. The deception is working. Rommel has fallen into the trap. But Montgomery knows that even the smallest change in the plan could mean disaster. There's no room for error. The success of the mission rests entirely on the precise execution of every detail. Every tank, every soldier, every piece of artillery must fall into place at exactly the right moment. As the sun rises on the day of battle, Montgomery's plan is in motion. The Allied forces, prepared and confident, are ready to take the fight to the Axis powers. There's no turning back now. What happens next will determine not just the fate of the North African campaign, but the future of the war itself. The air is thick with dust and anticipation. The sun is setting on the desert horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield as the first shots of the Battle of El Alamein ring out. The Allies have been preparing for this moment for weeks, and now the true test of Montgomery's strategy is underway. At the heart of Montgomery's plan lies one central idea: misdirection. His first key move is to feign an attack from the south, sending a large portion of his forces in a sweeping, deceptive movement. The desert air crackles with the sound of engines as fake tank columns roll across the barren landscape, deliberately creating the illusion of a major offensive. These decoys are bolstered by misleading radio transmissions, further convincing Rommel that the main attack will come from the southern flank. Rommel, ever the optimist, believes his own instincts. The Desert Fox shifts his forces southward, strengthening his defenses where he expects the assault to hit hardest. His confidence in his own ability to predict the enemy's movements works in Montgomery's favor. As Rommel spreads his forces thin, Montgomery watches from the rear, calm and calculating, knowing exactly what's unfolding. While Rommel's forces scramble to bolster their southern front, Montgomery's real attack begins. His forces, fresh and well-supplied, advance in the north, where Rommel has underestimated the strength of the British forces. The deception has worked. Rommel's forces are caught in a state of confusion, stretched too thin to respond effectively to the sudden shift in the battle's direction. The first wave of Allied troops hits hard, and the Axis forces are caught off guard. Artillery shells tear through the desert air, striking key Axis positions and quickly overwhelming the initial defenses. Montgomery, patient and methodical, understands the value of time and momentum. With each passing hour, the pressure mounts on Rommel, who is now faced with the reality that his enemy has outflanked him. As the battle rages on, Montgomery's deception continues to unfold in real time. The southern attack that Rommel had prepared for never materializes. Instead, it's the north that holds the true weight of the Allied assault. Rommel's reaction is swift, but by the time he realizes the extent of his miscalculations, the damage has already been done. His forces are already being pushed back, and the once feared Desert Fox finds himself on the defensive. But this is not a moment for celebration. Montgomery knows the battle is far from won. His men, though gaining ground, must maintain their focus. The Allies have the advantage, but Rommel is no stranger to turning the tide of battle with swift counterattacks. The real challenge now is to maintain momentum and continue pressing the advantage while Rommel scrambles to recover from the disarray Montgomery has caused. Rommel's frustration is palpable. His forces, outmaneuvered and misled, begin to retreat in disarray. But Montgomery, knowing that the victory is within reach, holds his ground, pressing forward with a steady hand. The battle has begun, and everything will be decided in these next critical hours. The desert winds grow stronger as the battle intensifies, carrying with them the shifting sounds of war. The Allied forces, under Montgomery's command, have gained the upper hand, and the momentum is now firmly in their favor. Yet, despite the growing pressure, Rommel's determination remains unbroken. He is not one to concede easily. It takes only hours for Rommel to realize the extent of the deception. As his southern defenses hold steady but the main Allied assault unfolds in the north, he begins to recognize the trap he has fallen into. Rommel is a tactician of extraordinary skill, but even the sharpest minds can be blindsided. The fact that Montgomery was able to execute such a complex deception so flawlessly both infuriates and humbles him. Rommel scrambles to adjust, ordering his forces to regroup and reposition, but the damage has already been done. In the chaos of the desert, Rommel's forces are stretched thin. Some divisions have already been pushed back, while others are caught in the wrong positions. The command structure begins to fray as Rommel's orders clash with the realities of the battlefield. His troops, once confident and disciplined, now find themselves on the defensive, constantly trying to react to an enemy they had not expected to face in this way. Rommel's frustration mounts. His aggressive, instinctive approach to warfare has worked countless times in the past, but now, against a methodical, well-prepared opponent, it seems insufficient. He orders his reserves into action, attempting to reorganize and create a new line of defense, but the Allies are relentless. Montgomery, ever patient, presses the attack with cold efficiency. His forces, bolstered by superior supplies and morale, move forward steadily. Rommel's failure to regain control of the situation only compounds his difficulties. In the early stages of the battle, Rommel had underestimated the Allied resolve. He had believed that his swift counterattacks would disorient the British and send them retreating once more. But Montgomery's leadership and the strength of his forces have proven otherwise. For every move Rommel makes to counterattack, Montgomery is already one step ahead, forcing Rommel to continually react to his opponent's plans rather than dictate the flow of the battle. The pressure on Rommel grows unbearable. His once pristine reputation as the Desert Fox begins to crumble under the weight of his tactical mistakes. His legendary ability to adapt and improvise has failed him when he needed it most. The battle for North Africa, once so firmly in Rommel's grasp, is slipping away with each passing hour. Rommel's retreat becomes more apparent as the day wears on. His forces, though not broken, are retreating in disarray, unable to match the coordinated assault of the British forces. Rommel knows that his only hope now is to delay Montgomery long enough for reinforcements to arrive. But even this hope is fading. The once confident Desert Fox has been outmaneuvered, his forces scattered, and his plans in ruins. As Rommel orders his men to fall back, he is fully aware that the battle has been lost. His quick thinking, once the hallmark of his success, has failed him in this critical moment. The British have taken the initiative, and it is no longer a battle of bold moves. It is a battle of endurance. Montgomery has won this round, and Rommel can only hope to salvage what little is left of his forces. The sound of tanks rolling forward, the crackle of radio communications, and the relentless march of Allied infantry signal the growing defeat for Rommel's forces. Montgomery's strategy, painstakingly crafted and executed with precision, is nearing its final phase. The British forces, with their disciplined advance and unwavering determination, are now in full control. The roar of tanks and the crackle of radio communications begin to fade as the dust settles over the battlefield. The battle for El Alamein, one of the most decisive moments in the Western Desert Campaign, has ended. The British Eighth Army stands victorious, and the Axis forces are in retreat, their once formidable presence in North Africa shattered. For Montgomery, the victory is a moment of profound relief. Months of planning, deception, and patience have finally borne fruit. His strategy, executed with precision, has not only defeated the Desert Fox, but has also revitalized the morale of the Allied forces. The soldiers, who had been demoralized after a series of defeats, now find themselves buoyed by their commander's confidence. For the first time in a long while, they believe in the possibility of victory. But victory comes at a cost. The desert is littered with the remains of battle, tanks, broken equipment, and the bodies of fallen soldiers. The price of this triumph is visible in the faces of the survivors, many of whom have lost comrades they will never see again. Montgomery, despite his strategic brilliance, knows the true cost of war is not measured in victories, but in the lives it claims. On the other side of the battlefield, Rommel's forces are in disarray. The retreat begins almost immediately, with Axis troops scrambling to withdraw and regroup. The tactical errors that led to the British victory have left Rommel in a precarious position. His reputation, once that of a military genius, now appears tarnished. Rommel's ability to recover from this defeat is uncertain. For the first time, the Desert Fox seems vulnerable. For Rommel, the aftermath is a bitter pill to swallow. He had come to North Africa as a conqueror, expecting to lead his forces to victory after victory. Instead, he now faces the grim reality of retreat. His confidence, once unshakable, has been shattered. And though he will fight to salvage what remains of his forces, he knows that the strategic momentum has shifted. The battle for North Africa is no longer his to win. The psychological toll of El Alamein extends far beyond the battlefield. On the Allied side, the victory breathes new life into the war effort. The British press, which had been filled with reports of defeat and failure, now shifts its focus to Montgomery's success. His careful planning and leadership have earned him the admiration of his superiors and the confidence of his men. But Montgomery is not one for grand celebrations. He knows that the war is far from over, and the battle for North Africa is just one part of a much larger struggle. On the Axis side, the defeat is a severe blow to the morale of Rommel's forces. The retreating German soldiers are tired and disillusioned, and the once promising campaign in North Africa has turned into a struggle for survival. Rommel, whose reputation as a brilliant tactician had inspired fear in the Allies, now faces a loss of prestige. His next steps will be critical, not just for his personal legacy, but for the future of the Axis powers in North Africa. The immediate aftermath of the battle is a sobering realization. The war is not over. Montgomery's victory has shifted the balance of power, but Rommel is not yet defeated. The Axis forces will regroup, and the British must press forward, using the momentum gained at El Alamein to push deeper into North Africa. For the soldiers who fought on both sides, the aftermath of El Alamein will be remembered as a turning point, one that marked the beginning of the end for the Axis in North Africa. But even as the dust settles, the next chapter of the war begins. The lessons of El Alamein will shape the strategies of both commanders as they prepare for the battles yet to come. The dust of the battlefield is settled, and the roar of combat has faded into the quiet of the desert. Yet the echoes of El Alamein resonate far beyond the confines of the western desert. The victory here marked more than just a military triumph. It became a turning point in the war, a symbol of what could be achieved through meticulous planning, perseverance, and sheer willpower. For Montgomery, the victory at El Alamein solidified his place in history. His calm, methodical approach to warfare, once questioned by many, had proven its worth on the battlefield. No longer was he the cautious commander who lacked the boldness of his contemporaries. Montgomery was now seen as a leader who could turn the tide of battle through careful preparation and unwavering determination. His success at El Alamein bolstered the confidence of the British Army, and more importantly, it gave the people of Britain a much-needed boost in morale. The Allied forces, having been pushed to the brink of defeat in North Africa, now saw a glimmer of hope. El Alamein was not just a victory, it was a declaration that the Axis powers were no longer invincible. The defeat of Rommel, once seen as the great strategic genius of the war, shattered the myth of Axis invulnerability. It was a reminder that with the right leadership, the tides of war could be turned, no matter how dire the circumstances seemed. For the soldiers who fought under Montgomery's command, the battle was not just about the land they had won, it was about the psychological shift it represented. The British Army, which had suffered from a series of setbacks, now felt that victory was within their grasp. They had faced the fearsome desert fox and emerged victorious. For the first time in years, the Allies believed they could win. But for Rommel, the aftermath of El Alamein was nothing short of devastating. The retreat from the battle, followed by his eventual departure from North Africa, marked the end of his once dominant position in the region. Rommel, who had become a symbol of German military prowess, was now seen as a commander who had failed to deliver the victory his forces so desperately needed. His retreat signaled the unraveling of the Axis position in North Africa, a setback from which they would never fully recover. Rommel's reputation, once untouchable, began to erode. Despite his remarkable skill as a tactician, his failure at El Alamein highlighted his over-reliance on bold, instinctive moves rather than the careful, patient strategy that Montgomery had embraced. The aftermath of the battle forced Rommel to come to terms with the limits of his approach. No longer could he rely solely on his instincts to carry the day. The Axis powers, though not immediately defeated, were now on the back foot. The loss of North Africa, coupled with Rommel's withdrawal, meant that the Allies had control of the region's vital resources and strategic positions. The Axis supply lines were severed, and the Allies gained a foothold that would serve as the launch pad for future campaigns. The road to Italy and beyond had opened up, and Montgomery's success at El Alamein was a key catalyst for what came next. Rommel's retreat, meanwhile, marked the beginning of a slow but steady erosion of Axis power in North Africa. The once strong German position, built on years of success, had been toppled by a single, decisive defeat. The loss at El Alamein was the first major blow in a series of setbacks that would eventually lead to the Axis surrender in Africa. Rommel's retreat was not just a military failure, it was a symbol of the Axis powers' declining fortunes. El Alamein, in many ways, became the blueprint for Allied success in the subsequent campaigns. The victory proved that with patience, preparation, and psychological resolve, the Axis could be defeated. For the Allies, it was a moment to celebrate, but also a moment of recognition. The war was far from over, and the challenges ahead would be just as daunting. The legacy of El Alamein wasn't just about the battle itself, it was about what it represented. The beginning of the end for the Axis in Africa, the restoration of Allied confidence, and the first of many victories that would lead to ultimate triumph in World War II. As the dust of battle settled and the Allied forces stood victorious, the real consequences of El Alamein began to unfold. This was not just a battle won, it was the opening chapter of a much larger campaign that would eventually lead to the downfall of Nazi Germany. The Allied success in North Africa provided the momentum needed to push deeper into Europe, starting with the invasion of Italy. With the defeat of Rommel and the Axis forces in North Africa, the Allies gained control of the region's strategic points. The Suez Canal was secured, and the Axis powers were deprived of access to critical oil supplies from the Middle East. This victory also opened up the Mediterranean for Allied naval operations, allowing the Allies to begin preparations for the next phase of the war, the invasion of Sicily and the eventual Italian campaign. For Montgomery, the victory at El Alamein was a personal and professional triumph. His reputation as a commander was solidified. No longer was he seen as just another cautious strategist. He had proven himself on the world stage, outwitting one of the most renowned military minds of the time, Rommel. This victory paved the way for his continued leadership in subsequent operations, particularly the Italian campaign. Montgomery's careful planning and ability to maintain Allied unity would become key factors in the success of later invasions. But as the Allies celebrated their victory, they were keenly aware that this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. The Italian campaign, though strategically important, would not be easy. The Axis forces would not give up without a fight, and the battle for Europe would continue to rage on. The victory at El Alamein was crucial, but the war was far from over. For Rommel, the consequences of the battle were deeply personal. His failure at El Alamein marked the beginning of the end of his command in North Africa. His retreat and the subsequent collapse of the Axis position left him with little to hold on to in the region. Rommel, once hailed as a military genius, now faced the reality of his strategic defeat. His reputation had been tarnished, and despite his previous successes, his career would never fully recover. Rommel was recalled to Germany, where he was given a less prestigious role, though his stature as a war hero still lingered. However, his disillusionment with the war grew. He would not participate in the subsequent invasions of Italy or Normandy, and his return to Germany marked the end of his command on the front lines. Rommel, who had once been the embodiment of Nazi military success, now found himself a prisoner of circumstance. He would later be implicated in a plot to assassinate Hitler, which led to his forced suicide in 1944. As Rommel's fortunes waned, Montgomery's star continued to rise. He played a crucial role in the planning and execution of the Allied invasion of Sicily, and later the invasion of Italy. His careful, methodical approach, which had served him so well at El Alamein, became a defining feature of his leadership in future campaigns. The Allies, buoyed by their success in North Africa, pressed forward with increasing confidence, their eyes now fixed on the final goal, the defeat of Nazi Germany. The war, however, remained unpredictable. The victory at El Alamein had dealt a significant blow to the Axis powers, but the battle for Europe was far from over. The Allies would face new challenges and adversities as they pushed further into Italy and beyond, culminating in the D-Day invasion in 1944. But the strategic shift set in motion by El Alamein, along with the psychological boost it gave to the Allies, would continue to reverberate throughout the remainder of the war. In the end, the legacy of El Alamein is not just found in the military maneuvers or the tactical brilliance of Montgomery and his forces. It is found in the wider narrative of the war itself. El Alamein was a pivotal moment, the spark that ignited the eventual Allied victories in Italy and Western Europe. For the Allies, it proved that with patience, careful planning, and the right leadership, victory was not just possible, it was within reach. As the war dragged on, the memories of El Alamein would serve as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the ability of even the most desperate forces to turn the tide when given the right tools and the right leadership. As the final echoes of gunfire fade from the western desert and the sands settle over the battlefield, it becomes clear that the Battle of El Alamein was more than just a tactical victory. It was a turning point, one that would ripple through the rest of World War II. In the grand sweep of history, this battle was but a single moment, yet its impact would be felt in every subsequent campaign and every decision made thereafter. For the Allies, El Alamein was a victory not just of arms, but of spirit. The British, who had suffered defeat after defeat in the desert, were now able to claim a monumental success. Montgomery's leadership, his strategy, and his ability to inspire confidence in his men had restored a sense of hope and pride to an army that had been on the brink of collapse. With this victory, the Allies proved that the Axis forces were not invincible, that with the right leadership and unity, the tides of war could be turned. But the victory at El Alamein did not come without sacrifice. The men who fought under Montgomery's command had seen death and destruction in the harsh desert. They had faced hardship, doubt, and loss, yet they emerged victorious. For them, El Alamein represented not just the defeat of Rommel, but a personal triumph over adversity. For Rommel and the Axis forces, the battle marked the beginning of their decline in North Africa. Rommel, once seen as a military genius, had been outmaneuvered and outsmarted. His confidence, which had once been his greatest asset, now became a weakness. The loss at El Alamein shattered the myth of the Desert Fox. The German forces, although still formidable, had suffered a devastating blow. Rommel's retreat was not just a military retreat, it was a symbolic retreat from the momentum that had once been theirs. His reputation, which had carried him to great heights, was now irrevocably tarnished. In the weeks and months that followed, the Allies pressed their advantage. With the Axis forces in full retreat, the British and their allies moved on to the next phase of the war, the Italian campaign. The defeat of Rommel at El Alamein opened the door for the Allies to launch operations in Italy and begin the long march into Europe. What started as a desperate struggle in North Africa now became a springboard for further victories. El Alamein also marked a shift in the psychological war. The victory served as a beacon of hope for the Allies, showing that they could defeat their enemies and turn the tide of war. For Rommel, the defeat forced him to confront the harsh reality that his strategies had failed him at a critical juncture. His retreat from North Africa was a bitter acknowledgment that the Axis position in the region was no longer sustainable. Despite his later efforts in Europe, Rommel would never regain the stature he once held. His career, and ultimately his life, would be shaped by the failure at El Alamein. For Montgomery, the victory was a crowning achievement that would define his legacy. It was a moment of validation for his methodical approach to warfare, proving that careful preparation and strategic thinking could achieve success where boldness and instinct might falter. Montgomery would go on to play a crucial role in the subsequent Allied invasions of Sicily and Italy, further cementing his status as one of the war's most prominent commanders. The victory at El Alamein, though significant, was not the end of the war. It was the beginning of a long, grinding series of battles that would eventually lead to the defeat of Nazi Germany. But in that moment, as the Allied forces watched Rommel's retreat, they knew that they had struck a decisive blow. El Alamein had shown the world that the Axis powers were not invincible, that they could be beaten, and ultimately, that victory was within the Allies' grasp. The Battle of El Alamein may have been fought in the unforgiving desert sands, but its legacy would echo across the rest of the war. It was a battle of strategy, leadership, and perseverance, a battle that proved the power of determination and unity in the face of overwhelming odds. And in the end, it was a victory that helped shape the course of history. As the last of the dust settles over the battlefield at El Alamein, and the sounds of war fade into the stillness of the desert, the weight of the victory begins to sink in. The battle has been won, and the Axis forces are in retreat, but the Allied soldiers know that their journey is far from over. El Alamein was a moment of triumph, yes, a victory that turned the tide in North Africa and paved the way for further campaigns. But even as the cheers of victory echo across the desert, there is an underlying awareness that this battle was just one piece of the larger puzzle. The war is not won in a single day, nor in a single battle. It is won by the steady, unwavering persistence of soldiers and commanders, by the sacrifices made by men and women who fight for a cause greater than themselves. For Montgomery, the battle was a professional triumph, one that would shape the rest of his career. He had proven himself not just to his superiors, but to the soldiers who had fought under him. His meticulous planning, his patience, and his ability to inspire his men had won the day. But Montgomery, like many commanders, knew that one victory does not secure the war. The road ahead was still long and fraught with challenges. There would be more battles, more decisions, more moments of doubt and uncertainty. El Alamein was a beacon of hope, but the victory was tempered by the recognition that the real work was only just beginning. For Rommel, the aftermath of the battle was a bitter pill to swallow. The defeat in North Africa shattered his confidence and tarnished his reputation. Once seen as one of the most brilliant tacticians of the war, Rommel was now relegated to a less prestigious role in Germany, far from the front lines. His time in North Africa had ended not in a victory, but in retreat. The loss at El Alamein had cost him not only his position, but also his belief in his own invincibility. Rommel would later return to Germany, where the bitter reality of his defeat Africa would haunt him, and his eventual involvement in the assassination plot against Hitler would mark the end of his career and his life. But the true cost of El Alamein wasn't just felt by the generals. The soldiers who fought in the desert, both British and Axis, carried the emotional scars of the battle with them long after the dust settled. The human toll of war is always hidden beneath the tactical analysis and strategic moves, but it is no less real. For every victory, there are sacrifices made, lives lost, dreams shattered, and the heavy weight of trauma that follows even the greatest triumphs. As Montgomery's men celebrated their victory, many of them knew that their triumph had come at a heavy cost. The war was still far from over, and the memories of what they had endured would stay with them long after the final battle had been fought. The legacy of El Alamein, though, was undeniable. It was a victory that not only shifted the momentum in North Africa, but also symbolized a turning point in the war. It was proof that the Allies, once beleaguered and on the defensive, could overcome their adversaries with careful planning, strategic execution, and unwavering resolve. It was a victory that inspired hope in the hearts of soldiers and civilians alike. For the first time in years, the possibility of victory seemed within reach. And yet, as the Allies began their push into Italy and Europe, they knew that the war was far from won. Each victory brought them closer to the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany, but there were still many battles to fight. The Axis would not surrender easily, and the road to final victory would require more than just one triumph. It would require sustained effort, relentless commitment, and the willingness to face the horrors of war head-on. As El Alamein's victory reverberated through the ranks of both the Allies and the Axis, the realization was clear. The struggle was far from over, but for the first time, the Allies could see the road to victory ahead of them. It was not the end of the war, but it was a crucial step forward, a step that marked the beginning of the end for the Axis powers. The victory at El Alamein would become a rallying cry for the soldiers who would follow in its wake and a symbol of the Allied resolve to continue the fight until the ultimate defeat of Nazi tyranny.